explain to me how you came up with the idea that it's fundamentally atheistic?
Can I? Oh,
yeah,
sure.
I'm talking to you.
I know, you're looking at him.
I'm looking at you.
Sorry. Anyway, it's fundamentally atheistic because it's based off the idea that the soul does not exist. By this meaning that we are purely physical and therefore reigned by the laws of physics. If physics determine how things behave, like in case of gravity, it was proposed that moral and decision-making behavior works much the same way. We are simply being caused by external sources or things that happen before us, or even sometimes biological urges to do what we do, and in the end we have no choice. This is very different because one of the primary beliefs within determinism is essentially we are purely physical. There is no non-physical mind, there is no soul. So at the very least, you could say it's not Christian, but for the most part, you could say it's atheistic.
The only reason I said that is because you take a deterministic stance that God is omniscient and all powerful in the sense that he knows everything and can dictate everything. You don't have to jump too far to see that God can theoretically, if he knows what you're going to do already, then you made no decision in it. Now you may not know what you're going to do,
well, yeah.
But if God knows it, he can't really be called.
Well, that's pretty much what.
Isn't that just deterministic?
Well, that's pretty much what I said. Although we're getting into a semantics issue. I say
one says God, the other says gravity. That's not semantics.
Well, no, that's not. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood you. What you're saying God and determinism, and I'm saying determinism is a fundamentally atheistic philosophy. However, if you go into something like predetermination, basically, God knows everything we're going to do. We don't. But according to, from his perspective, we're certainly basically all robots, which means it's kind of illogical to have a judgment for us because basically we're just following our programming, so to speak.
And it can turn out any other way.
And even if you disagree, with that belief, I believe that if you follow the deterministic, or at least, kind of ideals, but within a theistic setting, i.e. predestination, you eventually come to the conclusion that he knows what's going to happen to us, and he's punishing us for it, and we have no choice but to go down that path. It's basically the analogy I've always used is that you have a beautiful garden and you're an engineer. I don't know why an engineer likes to garden, but go figure. And he makes a robot that has artificial intelligence, so it feels like it makes all its decisions, but it's really following its programming. Its programming, it really likes to trample flowers. So you leave it out in the garden, and you wait, and you just kind of go about your day inventing other things, and then he comes back, terribly, terribly angry and surprised that the robot destroyed his garden. This is an interesting parallel to the Garden of Eden story, by the way. And you kind of...
You wouldn't be surprised if you destroyed his garden.
Exactly.
But for the past new member, hold on to your thoughts.
I just saw the flyer right now.
Sarah, please state your name and why you're here, and then you can ask yourself.
Oh, cool. My name is Steve Lozano, and I just saw the flyer over there.
My name's Crystal, and I helped put up the flyer, so I figured it's a
And just a reminder, we only have 20 more minutes. I just looked at the time. So if we don't finish all this at school, there's still a continuation session.
Right.
So,
yeah, there was no way. But anyway, as I was in mid-thought, basically the engineer making the robot who tramples flower analogy is actually a very good parallel with the Genesis Garden of Eden story if you at least look far enough in it. And you can at least see how the predestination kind of shakes up this problem, because free will is a popular defense between mainstream Christianity, but really when you look right at it, it just doesn't pan out.
Were you assisting with it?
The free will argument.
I'll get to that later. Just to answer the original question about why I thought free will defense is bullshit, is because you can't. They try and have all the unforeseen evidence, the omniscience, the omnipotence, the benevolence, and still say that evil doesn't necessarily have to exist in the same way we understand it, because we created ourselves. So yes, there is evil in the world, but it's not God's fault, so nothing about it. But I've never been able to understand how, if you have a being, I guess you call him a being, because that sounds like something that we could understand, something that defies every law of nature and logic that we understand, that can do literally anything, could not create a best possible world where evil and suffering were not required. I think that sounds like a limitation to me.
Well, the argument is that he could, but he didn't, because we need to, have these trials in our life and the whole soul-making argument, which I'm sure you've heard at some point.
Actually, it's just a whole comment. I was going to be brutal about this. We're actually getting on to another one that we will be talking about right after this, and that is the other roles in the soulmate hypothesis that Alan Clancy had originally hypothesized. So we're going to get to this. So just save those juicy thoughts that have been permeating.
Sure.
But okay, so there is an argument that I will put forward, and that's it's an atheistic argument, and it's more commonly than not usually put out about, and that's that it deals with the free will defense. That if God, and I think you guys were getting to this, but just to put it straight out now, if God knows it, His omniscient knows the whole future ahead of time, yet He gives His creatures free will. It doesn't make sense to say that God knows what's going on, but yet it's a logical impossibility by the nature of a contradiction. That you can't ensure that your creatures are going to not introduce them to evil. So it seems that we're putting a logical limitation on God. And so a common defense of this, criticism by atheists is that God is then not bound by the laws of logic. And it sounds like that's what you're getting to.
Well, I've heard a lot of Christians say that you can't talk about things like that because God is so beyond our own mental
But then,
We can argue that.
and all
That's true.
atheistic kind of thinking, it isn't too intellectually embarrassing on a theistic level. Kind of what Homer kind of alluded to, thinking that we are limited to our metaphysical reality and our metaphysical thinking, and if we are constrained to our own personal kind of logical thinking based on the laws of nature. And for something that obviously can defy the laws of nature, then it isn't too embarrassing to think that he himself on it.
I'm sorry, tell us your name and then tell us what you're here.
We got
Well, I'm Cameron, and I like to think about things.
Yay!
So I think that although yes, if we're analyzing something that is beyond the personal laws of nature and also to theoretically create these laws of nature, then it isn't too, I think, intellectually embarrassing at the very least to assume that if he can manipulate and create the laws of nature, then he himself can be beyond the laws of nature. I'm just saying, I'm just in a small little defense of these. I know the majority of you are most likely atheistic, right, as I am, so.
Food for thought with free will. Now, my daughter, sometimes I know that she's going to be disobedient, but it's still her free will. I'll look at her and I'll watch her. I know she's going to do that. I know she's going to do it. And she does it, and I spank her. Like, just because I knew she was going to do it doesn't mean that it should be okay. It's not like she's a puppet. It's not like I'm making her do it. So that would be the difference between free will and, I don't know, I think God still has the right to punish, in that sense. But, okay, yeah.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but this is the main reason why I use the engineer-robot analogy. Because the difference between God and a parent figure is that the engineer actually builds a robot and knows the internal engine and programming of the robot.
My baby
And in a sense, but basically they know everything that it's going to do. They know how its brain functions. Whereas a sentient living being is quite different. And I know this might seem self-contradictory, but to the very least you could say, to God, we are robots.
You could say something about a dog, though. You should say, you see your dog sitting around the road. Don't take a piss there. Don't do it. Oh, took a piss there. It doesn't mean I didn't create the dog, but I knew that it was going to do that thing just out of probable inference. I've seen dogs do that.
Yeah.
Take a piss there. I've seen little kids do X, Y, and Z when they're going to be disobedient.
Or you know your
Once again,
That doesn't mean
I know. Once again, this is why I use the robot analogy, because when you're dealing with a living being and you can use probable inference, yeah, you have a pretty good idea, but you don't necessarily have the power to know absolutely for sure, 100% it will happen. Whereas when you have a robot who is programmed to trample flowers and you leave it alone in a flower garden, it's going to trample flowers.
Right, but you can't be surprised when that happens.
Exactly, which is why I made the analogy, because it points out a very, very, very big problem with the creation story of the Bible, which is one of the main reasons.
So why does the free will defense work?